Hey, this is Syrup and Eggs, and today we're talking about bees.
That is covered. That is covered.
Sunshine on my wings. Sip the nectar sweetly. Joy in simple things. Flowers bring me treasure in every bloom I see. Life is just a pleasure when you're a little bee. Buzz, buzz all day long. In the hive we sing our song. Golden honey magic can't be wrong. Buzz, 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 we belong.
Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be messing with some bees. It's been long requested, but we're finally going to do it. We're going to complement our syrup with some honey. And full suits or English style suits. It's a full like onesie with the veil built in. It's a good idea to wear a baseball cap with these guys because it keeps the netting off of your nose. And if it's leaned up against your nose, the bees will find you and they will sting you right on the nose. So
I'm gonna have to risk it without a baseball hat.
I can give you a baseball hat. So yeah, these are what we're going to be using. They offer you the most protection because this year my bees are a little bit testy. So better than just using a veil or a jacket and veil. We need the whole get up. So we're going to be using these. Very hot though, so make sure you have something to drink because you're going to need it.
Listening, pollen on the breeze. Every moment listening can't be wrong. Buzz, buzz, we belong.
All right, Mike. So the first thing I want to tell you about is this little guy right here. This is a nucleus hive. They usually call him a nuke. People will call him that for short. I had caught a little wild swarm that was queenless earlier in the year, and I put them in here with some resources from one of my other hives to try and get them to reestablish. I could already tell the bees have absconded from this, so they're not in here, but I'm interested to see what the bees did in here, if anything, with the resources that I gave them. And we could talk about some of the different hive components while we're in here, because it won't be crawling with bees right now.
Yeah, that's great.
So nukes are little, usually 5 frames. You'll often get a new colony of bees in one of these. You'll purchase them in one of these. The 2 ways you get them usually are package hives you get in the mail, these little boxes with screens on the side filled with bees, and you'll often get a frantic call from the post office asking what the hell they should do with your bees before they come out and deliver them to your house. Or like this one I got from a guy who goes down to Florida every year and gets a bunch of bees through Berg's Bees. It's an organization here in town. But we can see here, these are the frames that the bees will build out their comb on top of the foundation, which we'll pull out and look, and they'll store their resources and rear their young in there. And this will be our good introduction to our hive tools.
Yes. What are these called now?
So these are hive tools. There's many different types of hive tools. I almost exclusively use this type, which is the J-hook. There's also an Italian type, which is a little bit different. And another one, I think they call it a European hive tool. But the J-hook is very versatile for pulling out your frames and scraping off propolis, bee glue, and all that stuff. So you can use the hook on the J-hook to pull out some of these frames. And so this was an older frame that I put in to give the bees just some place where they could store resources and they didn't have to worry about building out the wax.
Oh, okay.
Because building out beeswax is one of the most resource intensive things that bees have to do. It costs them the most.
And so all these little combs here, this is all the beeswax.
Yes, and it's on top of a plastic foundation, which you can see in this new frame that I put in
Oh,
there.
gotcha, yeah.
There's a plastic foundation that has the pattern drawn out on it, and they've coated it in beeswax to make it easier for the bees to start on it. But the idea is that they'll build onto that, and they'll keep everything from water to pollen to new brood, which is effectively baby bees. The baby bees aren't really a thing. There's brood. When they emerge from the cell, they're full adults, so you don't really see baby bees.
Oh, cool.
Ever. Just larvae and pupa and eggs, that kind of stuff. So they're not seeing much in here It doesn't look like they drew out any comb. Oh, there's a little bit of stuff in here.
So this is new production from the bees.
Yeah, this was new from that little colony I put in there. Obviously, they didn't stay, so it's not in here. But this next frame looks like they did fill up at some point, and it's probably been robbed out since the bees absconded from the hive. So they left and went somewhere else. But other bees, probably my bees, are very opportunistic. So once they leave, they'll go in and just rob everything and take it back to their hive. But this one here, you can see they cap these. So it looks like they actually started to lay brood in here and cap them off. When they're done doing whatever they're going to do in a particular cell, they'll put a cap on it. And that looks like what they started to do here. And you can see there's just hive beetles crawling all over this thing. So they've been gone for a while. These beetles, there are a number of different mitigation methods that you can use to try and keep them under control. You'll find them in pretty much every single hive. Just no getting rid of them. There's a lot of them in this, obviously, because the hive's not being cared for. It's completely abandoned. So
well, that's cool. So this is a nuke.
Yep, this was a nuke that we tried to rehabilitate a very small swarm, a queenless swarm.
All right, so this is my first time being in one of these bee suits and being close to bees where they're swarming all around you. It's kind of wild. I don't know if you can see any of them, but I can hear them hitting my bonnet here, and you can see some down here. They're not like crazy swarming around us, which is nice. So Chris is going to get into this hive right now.
Yeah, we're going to give them a little smoke. So the purpose of the smoke is to kind of trick the bees, evolutionary tricks that they've developed over the years. So when they think there's a fire, they're going to start gorging themselves on honey, which will make them kind of lethargic to kind of calm them down. It also serves to mask the pheromones that the bees release, which is one of their main forms of communication inside the hive. So the smell of the smoke kind of disrupts some of that. So the idea is that it'll kind of help keep the hive from going into alarm mode. So some of the reasons that we use the smoke. Some beekeepers pride themselves on not using any smoke. Some beekeepers pride themselves on not wearing any personal protective equipment. We're not about any of that. We do all the things. So it doesn't take a lot of smoke. We might have to light that back up if they get a little angry. It should be good on that. So this is the top cover or the outer cover. Protects the rest of the hive from the weather. We'll often prop these up open with some rocks to give some extra ventilation for the bees in the summer. Often get all your extra hive friends here. This one has there were several ants that just ran by out of here, which is kind of interesting. It's not usually a great thing to see. Ants are on a hive. It usually means that the hive is weak, but this hive is not weak. You can tell already just by the amount of bees up here in this super. There are two types of boxes that go on a beehive. You'll have usually one or two deep chambers on here. This is basically what you leave for the bees. All this is theirs. This is all going to be all their food and water and brood that they need to survive. And when we harvest, we'll harvest from the supers, and there can be multiple supers on a hive, and we might be putting an extra one on today. We'll see what's going on. This looks like a very busy hive. Use our J hook in here.
This is wild. This is wild.
Just try and be gentle. So this is our inner cover, which goes on top of the topmost box that you have here. So we've got a lot of hive beetles in here, but it looks like they may actually be corralling them here because I don't really see any down here. The bees will kind of like just pick a place for them and kind of corral them into there, but might have to end up getting some commercial remedies here for these beetles in here, which are usually like little traps that fit inside of there that the hive beetles kind of just get stuck in. So just taking a peek down onto the super here. This super's been on for probably about 2 months. It looks like they've only drawn out comb on this one frame here that I can see down in there. So they may, oh, there's some over here. We've got some drawn out comb on this frame, and this frame. So they are busy up here, but they've got a long way to go before they fill this out. It's kind of a rebuilding year for me. I lost a bunch of my hives last year, which was very depressing. But this colony, we've been just sort of nursing back to health. So we probably won't harvest from them this year unless they have a really bumper fall nectar flow and go gangbusters. So we're gonna pop this super off, and we're gonna go down into the deeps. We'll see if we can find the queen, which we usually can't. At least I usually can't. And we'll just make sure we don't see anything too funny. The bee just tried to sting my glove.
How often do you have to come and check on these bees? Or is it like kind of just set and forget and check them on at the end of the season?
So there's some debate about that. I usually tell people, try and get into your hives once a month during the active season. Winter inspections are a thing, but they're infrequent, and you got to open the hives up in the cold, and it's not great for the bees, and you're potentially exposing them to a lot of moisture. So I don't really recommend for your average hobbyist to get in during the winter. So we're gonna have to smoke these bees a little bit. They're really aggressive today.
So when you say like the active season, is that mostly summer here? We're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so
So like May through September, or is it like June through September?
the active season starts like in May. If you're getting new bees, sometimes you can get them as early as late February. And you'll have to do stuff when you get your newbies to get them into wherever you're going to keep them. But usually you're looking at like mid-May or June for activity. Once you start to have days that are consistently above 50 degrees, which is the lower limit for the bees to function, you'll know as soon as it goes above 50 because you'll see the bees coming out of the hive. They don't really do that if it's any colder because they'll just basically freeze up and die. So the bees, as well as gathering nectar and water and pollen, will also gather up plant resin, and they turn it into this stuff called propolis, which is also referred to as bee glue. And it's pretty remarkable. It's this stuff right here. But they'll use it to fill in extra cracks. It has properties that cause it to be antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral. So it has health benefits as well. And they'll use it to seal up the hive. They'll also use it to mummify things that might get into the hive and die. Like if a mouse were to get into the hive, it would be killed by the bees eventually. But that would be too big for the bees to remove from the hive, and the bees keep the hive very clean. They remove anything that doesn't belong in there. But the things that are too big, like maybe a dead mouse that they can't get off, they'll mummify in in propolis. So
Oh, that's interesting.
pretty useful stuff. This super is well bee glued down here. I'm having trouble actually lifting it off.
I hope the mics can pick up the buzzing. It sounds awesome.
It does. It's really cool. You know, when you're by yourself and it's just you and your bees and you're standing over the hive and you just have that smell of wood and honey, and then just like the sound of the bees, it really kind of like takes you to a different place. Slow down. It's one of those like hidden joys of life.
All right, I'm getting really close to see if I can get my mic to pick up the buzzing.
This is the main part of the hive. We can get in here and we're looking for different things. We might look to see if we find bees that have like deformed wings, which deformed wing disease is a thing that can be a problem for your hive. We're looking for an excess of these little guys called varroa mites, which are these mites, again, are one of the things that are in every single hive, but it's just a matter of them, like the quantity of them. They're these little mites that detach themselves like basically where the like shoulders of the bee would be, and they're a parasite, and they don't kill the bees, but they weaken them. And if you have a lot of varroa mites in your hive, it could lead to a really weak colony, which could lead to other problems. It was one of the main things they suspected that was responsible for colony collapse disorder a number of years ago, in conjunction with things like systemic pesticides and things like that. But varroa mite was really prolific there for a while, and still is. But a number of regulations, particularly in the EU, in regards to systemic pesticides, really helped to mitigate the problems that we were having with colony collapse disorder that everybody was worried about, where all the bees were going to die. So here's some more propolis. You can see it's very squishy, light brown color. Plant resin.
All right, are you gonna try to pull one of these out? Or?
Yeah, let's try to pull one of these out. There's a newer frame here in the middle. Looks like one that I put in. I don't remember when. Probably this year sometime.
Yeah, they don't like this part, do they?
No, these bees are particularly testy. I've had other colonies in the past that were a lot more chill, but you know, the aggressive nature of this particular colony may be part of what has contributed to their survival when my other colonies died out. So it's definitely not their favorite thing, but I try and not be as intrusive as possible. So it looks like they built out the comb a little further on this side here, which is why they haven't built anything really on this frame, which is okay. It makes it easier for me to get in and out and inspect. I don't like to pull more frames than I have to. Just checking out the bees, making sure they look healthy. I don't see anything particularly concerning. I'm liking the number of bees in this colony for this time of year, which is good. I haven't seen a lot of drone bees in this colony, which is interesting, but not necessarily concerning.
What's a drone bee?
Drone bees are the males. So it's definitely a bee colony, a honey bee colony anyway, is definitely a matriarchal society. Queen leads it, and all the bees that go out and gather resources and do the work inside the hive are all female. The drone bees, which are the males, you'll see are larger in size and have bigger eyes. And so they're Their big eyes are so they can find a queen. Their only job, it's not their only job, but their main job is to mate. And so every day they'll fly off and they'll meet in these what are called drone congregation areas, where male bees from different colonies kind of like meet up, usually high above some kind of geographical feature of distinction, with like a church steeple or a particularly high tree, and they just hang out there and wait for a queen to fly by. And then when one inevitably does, they'll all chase after her and try and do their thing before anyone else. And she'll mate with a bunch of different drone bees while she's out there. The drone bees that successfully mate die, and the queen comes back, and that's the only time that she'll go out and mate. Those are called her nuptial flights. She'll make one or two of those shortly after she emerges from her queen cell. But when it gets to be the fall, the females will kick all the males out of the hive, and they'll all die because they don't need them to get through the winter. So let's try and pull this frame out here. This is a very busy frame. Get our hive tool in there, and we'll separate it here a little bit. It's very well glued in. Probably have to scrape some of this off here to get it out of the way. Get our J-hook in. Lift up. Just go slow, be patient. Enjoy the experience. I'll drop my J-hook here. So this is a nice frame.
Boy, that is covered with bees.
That is covered with bees.
Oh yeah.
So we got a couple of things going on this frame besides the bees. So you can see all this like smooth capped comb here. This is honey. So they'll deposit nectar into the cells, and then as it dries out and reaches a moisture content below 14%, that's what turns into honey. So once it reaches that point, they'll cap it, and it's ready to be stored, and they can use it later on when resources are low or over the winter. But we also have other things going on in this frame. There's water stored in these sections right here. You can see it kind of like glistening under the bees a little bit. And then these capped cells down here that are a little bit more organized, this is brood. So this will be new bees soon that will be emerging out of these capped cells. The queen will go around and she will lay an egg in a cell. She decides whether that bee is going to be male or female. She lays the egg in there, and then the egg will hatch into a larva, and then right at like the pupa stage, the cell will get a cap on it, and it will remain capped until the bee is fully developed, and then a fully developed adult bee will emerge out of these cells. And sometimes you'll see one coming out. There's one coming out right here, actually. If you can get your camera on it, there's a bee right there ready to come out. And sometimes you'll actually see other bees trying to help get it out of there.
That's really cool.
Yeah. This colony looks nice and healthy. I haven't really seen any hive beetles down here in the bottom frame, which kind of backs up my theory that all those ones we saw on the top cover were being corralled there, which is great. And some people go in and pull out a bunch of frames and make sure that they find the queen and look at a lot more of the hive. I tend to just pull one or two frames, like the bare minimum necessary to get an idea of how things are going inside the colony. And so really that's about all I do for a regular inspection, unless I see some things that pique some curiosity or raise some concern. I'll usually only I'll pull the supers off and pull 1 or 2 frames out of the hive deeps.
Now, do bees go? So there's bees down in the second layer, or this bottom layer, the bottom box, right?
Yeah, so there are bees everywhere, obviously, but the queen's in there somewhere, and she'll have like a congregation around her of like nurse bees and bees that specifically like clean and take care of the queen, and she'll just move around for wherever she needs space, because she's going to be laying new brood constantly, and they don't do that. She doesn't do that all in one place, so she needs some space to move around and have some options. So that's why we have the two deeps, and also they need to be able to store enough resources in here, honey mostly, and some like bee bread and some pollen as well, to get through the winter. So that's why we make sure we keep the 2 deeps separate. And if you'll notice, when I lift up the super, when I put it back on here, there is a plastic grid stuck to the bottom of it.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so that's something that we add, called a queen excluder. And because the queen is bigger, she can't fit through that grate. So that causes only the worker bees to be able to get up in there. So you'll only find honey in the honey supers. So that's how we keep that excluded, because if the queen was allowed up there, she'd be laying brood and stuff inside there, and it just makes things easier on everybody. Just push these frames back in nice and slow. Try not to squish anybody. It's kind of an inevitability, unfortunately, but I do my very best to try and not squish anybody.
All right, so this is the excluder. It's like a screen that only the worker bees can get through, right?
That's right. Makes so that in these boxes you'll only have nice clean honey. Makes harvesting easier. And also protects your queen a little bit. We put the boxes on like not straight, kind of minimize the contact area from when you put it down, so the bees have a chance to like get out of the way as you put the boxes back together. So this is a standard Langstroth type hive. It's the most common type of beekeeper hive. It's named after a reverend. Can't remember his first name, but his last name was Langstroth, and he dedicated a large portion of his life to just observing bees and writing down his observations, and noticed what rules they used as to how they built their hives up internally, and came up with the measurements. So it's really kind of like the perfect environment for bees to live in. There are other types of hive as well. The other most common type would be a top bar hive, which is rather than vertical, is a horizontal type hive. It's great for older people. These all get very heavy, especially when they're full of honey. I mean, one of these supers can weigh probably like 40 pounds if it's full.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a lot of older people will use top bar hives because you can just sort of like flip open the top and have access to all the frames individually and move through that. But they're not as popular. And we just put the inner cover and the outer cover back on, and yeah, that's it. Nope. Somebody just got me through my suit. So.
All right, so that's the first time you've been stung since we've been doing this?
For today, yeah.
For today, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a bee on. I can't show you, but it was on my phone. It stung the rubber on my phone mount, and I watch it spin around and spin around and spin around, and eventually frees itself. I've seen that before. Like,
yeah,
they say if you can let them work themselves out of you, they'll leave. But I guess you got to withstand that pain.
Yeah. Yeah, this one I can't see the stinger, or maybe it's right here. Maybe I can feel it burning in my wrist. but I can't. I didn't see that one happen. So.
What's up, everybody? This is Syrup and Eggs, and I'm here today with my good friend Chris. And we are talking about bees.
Yeah.
So, Chris, would you consider yourself a hobbyist beekeeper then?
Oh, I would definitely at this point consider myself a hobbyist beekeeper.
Okay.
When I'm probably less serious about beekeeping than I was when I started. Hoping to change that and get back into it. At one point, I had offered to help a commercial beekeeper, but he wasn't really very interested. But
cool.
But yeah, so definitely a hobbyist.
Yeah, so this is in your backyard.
Uh-huh.
We're probably, what, 40, 50 feet away from your house?
Yeah, in the suburbs.
In the suburbs?
Yeah.
Actually, Chris lives on the same street that I do. So we have bees, chickens, you know, maybe somebody has a pig here.
Deep in the burbs, yeah.
And here's one of his hives right here. And we are going to explore the inside of this and check it out. He's going to explain all the frames and the top part, which is called the super.
Yeah, we got our super right here. There's a queen excluder right here in between this shorter box and this taller box, which is the first deep. We got two deep stacked on one another. And then there's also down here a bottom board, which in this case of this hive is also the landing board.
Okay. Yeah, so this is my first time in a bee suit. Is there like an official name for it? Or is it like a
there is, I believe these ones are called like English style veiled bee suit. There might be even a more proper name for that, but
all right, let's go back to the beginning. So what made you get into bees, and how long ago was that?
I don't know, probably about 7 years ago now. I wanted to do chickens, actually.
Okay.
And I was looking into chickens, and while I was looking into chickens, I decided it was going to be too much of a pain in the neck for me to do for several reasons. One of which that is when you go away on a trip, I have a hard enough time trying to find people to take care of my cats. So to find somebody that would take care of my chickens while I was away, and I was, that was one of the big hurdles that I had anticipated with chickens, amongst many others. Just in the area, we have foxes and stuff.
I've seen the fox.
So I kind of decided, since I was doing it all by myself and I didn't really have a lot of backup with that bees was actually a more attractive option for me. And so as I started to research it more and look into the different aspects of beekeeping, it seemed like something that was a really great fit. I was working a lot at the time, and also doing a little bit of travel later on. And so the bees really don't require a whole lot of time. It's just finding, like, one day a month, maybe even every 2 months during the active seasons, to get in and inspect your hives to make sure that everything's going okay. If you've got some kind of problem that you're dealing with, something that you're trying to mitigate, you might have to get in there a little bit more frequently. But for the most part, it's not really a super demanding hobby in terms of time.
Okay, that's interesting. So have you had any honey from your hives?
Oh, lots. More than I know what to do with most years that I do a harvest. I won't be doing a harvest this year. It's a rebuilding year. I had most of my colonies collapsed like last year. So I've just been like nursing the one colony back to health.
Okay.
And I've got to replace a bunch of my woodware and stuff like that. So I've just been kind of, most of these boxes back here are just sitting for right now. So they all need to be replaced. I've got some new stuff up in the garage that's ready to come down when it's needed. Some more stuff in the shed. So
now, do you have a specific type of a breed of bee, or I don't know what the right term is. I know maybe a breed or.
Well, so there are lots of different types of bees.
Right, there's different types, like honeybees. You got like yellow jackets.
Well, yellow jackets are actually in the wasp family.
Okay.
That's like Apis germanica. We always make fun. We make fun of them because they're Germans and nasty. So we call them Nazi bees sometimes, but they're not really bees at all. They're wasps. They're more aggressive.
Okay. But are there like different types of honeybees?
There are different types of honeybees. So The two most common types of honeybees, especially in terms of beekeepers that you'll get, is you'll get your European style honeybee, and then also they're like tiger bees. We'll refer to them as Russians sometimes. The European honeybees are they're a little bit more docile, a little bit more even tempered. The Russian ones are more aggressive, but they're also more hygienic, and they do better in environments where bees tend to have a little bit more problems. They're better at dealing with varroa mites and beetles and stuff like that. So more aggressive, but
Okay.
a little bit more robust.
And so what type are these?
These are European.
Okay, European bees.
Yep.
Now they do pretty well in our type of climate. I've seen just driving around in like the South Hills and around some farms and stuff that you see a lot of these out in the field somewhere, usually at a wood line. Like is that on purpose, or do they I don't really see too many boxes just out in the open in a field.
Yeah, well, it depends on the time of year. A lot of times farmers will contract out bees.
Okay.
So they'll actually pay a commercial beekeeper to bring in hives to help pollinate the crop so that the yields increase. But they'll only be there while those crops are in that stage of life where they need to be pollinated.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not a commercial beekeeper, but I would think if you had the bees in the middle of it, it might be a little easier for the bees, but they'll fly up to 5 miles if there's something that they really want.
Okay, that's pretty far.
Yeah, for a bee, and in a straight line, like that'll get you pretty far.
Yeah.
So they're probably just on the side of the field for convenience, probably just to access and to get them in and out of there, or keep them out of the way of other farm equipment.
So, as someone who's might be on the fence looking to get into bees as a hobby, what are some basic things that you need to start with?
Books.
Books?
Yeah.
Lots of research, I guess.
Yeah. I'm a big YouTube fan, and I get a lot of my information and my how-to knowledge from YouTube. But books were very beneficial for bees. I got a lot more than I actually read. But you'll find ones that you like that you'll go back to reference, and that made it pretty easy. So books are the first thing. The next thing to do would be to contact a local beekeeping organization. Most places have them, either through universities or independent organizations. Berg's Bees is the big one here in Pittsburgh, and they offer classes, and most importantly, they offer networking, so you can talk to other beekeepers and get to know some people. And especially if you have a problem, you have somebody that you can call and kind of get a second opinion on, or somebody with a little bit more experience. Or if you have a disaster, like you only have one hive and you accidentally squish your queen, somebody might be able to help you out with procuring a new queen or something like that. Or for whatever reason you need some frames with some resources on them.
Okay.
Somebody could help you out. So friends and knowledge.
Yeah, I guess buying the stuff is probably the easy part.
Yeah.
It's probably readily available, I would imagine. And
you can buy all your bee equipment off Amazon if you want. There are other companies that specialize specifically in bee equipment, like Man Lake is probably the biggest one out there.
Okay. All right, so can you walk me through a typical year of beekeeping, like, say January through December? Like, just what are your steps? Like, do you have a process, or do you really not start monitoring them until it gets to about May, when they start becoming more active?
So I usually don't do a whole heck of a lot during the winter. They do recommend that you do like 1 or 2 winter hive inspections. For me, it's not usually really worth it to disturb the bees, to open them up, to expose them to the moisture and the cold to do it. But if you have a weaker colony, it might, like if it's just the first year particularly, like I'll probably have to do one this winter with this hive to make sure that they had gathered enough food. And if they didn't, you might have to feed them, and you can feed them in the winter. Usually you'd feed them with like a water sugar hyper solution.
I was gonna ask you, what do you supplement them with?
Yeah, just sugar water. You'd boil it, and I forget what the ratios are. I have it. It's in one of my books that I'd go back and reference, where you can make make basically a simple syrup that you feed them.
Okay.
That doesn't work in the winter because it freezes.
Right.
So you can feed them usually with like a fondant. You can
Oh, okay.
like stick fondant in there. The bees will eat it. It'll get them through the winter. It's not great for them. It usually causes them to have dysentery.
Okay.
And so when they can come out to go to the bathroom, because they can only come out to go to the bathroom when it's above 50 degrees, so they hold it all winter.
Oh man.
It'll just be bee poop all over the hive. So bees with dysentery is not great.
So when it gets to spring and they start becoming more active, is there anything that you need to do to get them started, or do you have to worry about them flying away?
So there's a couple things that happen in the spring. It's a really active time for the beekeeper in the colony. But a lot of beekeepers want to feed their bees in the spring. That sugar water solution that I was talking about. I use chicken feeders. Sometimes I'll put an extra hive deep on top with like 3 chicken feeders of sugar water inside, so they don't have to come out. You don't have to feed them inside. That's just the way that I do it. So you'll be feeding the bees in the spring usually to get them off to a good start, and so they can focus on other things like drawing out comb and rearing brood and stuff like that. So feeding is important in the spring. If you're going to harvest honey, if you're just keeping bees for nature and the love of bees, you don't necessarily have to feed them. They're wild animals. The fact that they're in this thing is really only like a benefit to them. But if I didn't have the hive, this same colony would be living in a tree somewhere or wherever. So in terms of stuff that you absolutely have to do, it's minimal because they're just doing what they're supposed to do.
Okay. How long does it take to produce honey that you could actually use?
I usually harvest once a year,
Okay.
but technically you could do 2 harvests in a year. You could do a spring harvest. You can basically, like at the beginning of spring, you can take stuff that the bees didn't use over winter. So when the nectar flow starts, they're going to be able to find fresh food. And then at the end of fall, if your bees have gathered enough resources to get them through the winter, which they do pretty handily, you can then remove the honey supers before they winter, which is actually a good idea. You're going to want to take these off at the start of winter anyway, so that the way the bees only have to keep warm the bottom 2 hive deeps, and they will keep it warm. They'll actually they'll do what's called shivering, where the bees that are in there, they'll all cluster together around the queen, and they'll sort of like disconnect their wings from their wing muscles, and they'll just beat them really hard to generate heat, and they'll usually keep it between like 80 and 90 degrees
Fahrenheit. Oh wow, that is a
inside
lot warmer than I thought they would keep it. I thought it was like maybe 50 degrees or something like that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, well, that's what they say. I've never like taken the temperature. It's pretty hot, but wood's a pretty good insulator, and if they're actively pumping the heat in there, they keep it warm enough to survive. So
that's awesome. So you've had honey in the past from your hives. That's got to be a pretty rewarding experience. I can imagine. I get eggs every day, and I'm like, yes, I'm super psyched.
Yeah, I mean, it's not it's not like a daily gratification kind of thing.
Right.
You definitely have to build up for it, and like looking at this hive deep, there's really not a lot going in there, so it's like, not going to harvest anything this year. Although this particular colony is more than a year old. Again, it's been kind of a rough year for them.
Okay.
So no harvest from them this year, I don't think, unless they go nuts during the fall. So we'll see. But yeah, you could do safely 2 harvests per year with healthy colonies that are already established.
So is there anything you do to keep their bees safe throughout the year? Is there any prep you have to do? Do you have to worry about any type of animals getting to them?
So, I mean, it depends on where you are, right?
Okay.
So don't have too many problems with bears out here in the suburbs of Western Pennsylvania. Once every couple of years, somebody will claim that there's a bear sighting somewhere, but it's generally not something that we have to contend with, so we don't have to worry about electric fences around our beehives, which is something that some beekeepers have to do. It gets cold here, but not super cold. Not cold enough that we have to worry about wrapping the hives in the winter that beekeepers that are north of us will have to do. We're in a pretty good place geographically for keeping bees. You know, you go further south, you get longer seasons, but also drier. So you might have to like water your bees, provide them with like a bird bath with rocks in it
Okay.
and water so they can get a drink. You know, we get a decent amount of rain here, so we don't really have to do that. I do have a bird bath that I put rocks in for them. The beehives used to be up against my house,
Oh wow.
and it was perfectly fine. It was like, you know, they were next to my porch, and you could be on the porch, which is, you know, between 5 and 10 feet away, and for the most part, the bees wouldn't bother you. You wouldn't even really know they were there. It was great
Okay.
because you could just sit on the porch and like have a drink and watch the bees.
Yeah, I mean, even right now they've calmed down a lot since we've
Yeah,
taken the hive apart and pulled out some frames. And like before, they were like all over us. They were all over the camera. And now we're sitting here. I don't think I even have one on me right now. You have a couple, but they're flying around. They're flying around mostly. They're not really.
Yeah, a lot of the ones I noticed still on me, like this girl right here, she's has their stinger out, so she's already tried to sting me, and so she's probably not feeling so great right now. And when they sting, um, they give off the alarm pheromone, which is also the targeting pheromone, which signals to other bees to attack this spot. So that's probably why I have more of them on me than you do right now.
So what? I mean, you might have mentioned the story, but what got you into it? Like, why did you start doing bees? I mean, you said you wanted to do chickens, but then you found the bees.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I'm going to get bees because...
Well, I guess the answer to that would be victory gardens.
Okay.
So I had it, you know, I had my own little home victory garden, which is just, you know, your suburban plot where you grow your tomatoes, your cucumbers, and your beans, and, you know, whatever stuff that you plant. And I was into that. I had like the whole top flat part of my backyard at the time was fenced, and I had all kinds of crops going on there. And I was thinking of chickens as the next kind of like logical step in the home farming, like experiment hobby extravaganza. So I think that's what kind of like led me to chickens. And then when chickens just seemed kind of unfeasible for me, I just found this as like an alternative that, you know, still fit into that same wheelhouse, like helping like pollinate plants, that more like, you know, natural connection to your property and what's around you, and being able to feed yourself naturally with, you know, just stuff from your yard. It was kind of a natural extension of gardening.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember when you first got the bees.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you might have had a webcam set up on them.
I did I was able to do that when they were up against the house.
Yeah.
And there's no power down here. And so I miss the webcam a lot. The bee cam was really cool. There was I had a camera right on the landing board. So as long as it was warm enough and the sun was out, you could watch just the bees all day long, and you could catch them doing some pretty cool stuff, helping each other out when they get in a little bit of trouble on the landing board and stuff. It was really cool. I miss the bee cam, and if I can figure out a way to do it, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I've installed outdoor Wi-Fi, so that step is done.
There you go.
I might be able to do something with solar panels to provide power to the bee cam, but it's really shady down here. So.
It is, yeah. It's nice and cool though, because these canvas suits are quite warm. I can feel the sweat.
Oh yeah,
down me.
when I had 4 or 5 hives, you know, you'd be out here in July, you would just be dying.
Yeah,
and like
it is July right now. It's the end of July. So.
End of July, but it's a lot cooler.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
And we're not in direct sun.
Beautiful day.
It can get very hot in these suits for sure, and you learn to drink through the veil.
So what's been the most rewarding part of keeping bees? Like, I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, even with my chickens, just seeing them survive and grow and continue to produce, like, that's amazing. Like I feel like this is a little more challenging than chickens. Maybe just I don't know about, but like it just seems more challenging to me.
It's actually a very easy hobby, and like once you learn the basics, it's the upkeep is easy, and it's a hobby that I definitely recommend, you know, people get into. I can tell you for certain, like when I discovered that I had lost almost all of my hives, actually I lost all of them. This may or may not be an original colony. I'm not sure if this colony completely died or and another colony moved in,
Okay.
like a wild colony, which is possible and likely because the temperament of these bees is very different than the bees that I had in the past.
Okay.
Um,
So you're saying wild bees might be a little more aggressive than
it varies
bees?
from colony to colony,
Okay.
and just their genetic makeup. They have their own personalities. But yeah, when I lost my hives, I was very, very sad for a long time. I just, I was working like 2 or 3 jobs depending on the time you were looking at, and I was not here a lot. And when I was here, I was just working and couldn't find the time to look at them. And I don't know what happened to them, and it may not have been anything that I was able to prevent. But that was a sad day. But I think the most rewarding part of it, like the honey is great, and everybody thinks, oh, bees, honey, honey, honey. That's the whole point. But the best part is like when you're just alone with your thoughts, and you have the hive apart, and you're right above it, and you're staring down into the hive. Just the smell of the wood and the honey, and just the bees have their own smell, and the sound of all the bees flying around you and radiating up out of the hive, it really makes you feel like you're somewhere else, like you and the bees are the only thing that exist in that moment in the world. And if you need to clear your head, like just open up your beehive and stick your head in there and just get lost in the hive. And to me, that's probably the most rewarding part. A close second is when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, like, can we do this? Can I like come by and like we can get in there and see what it's like, and I can learn about bees." That's probably a close second.
I understand that. I very much love sharing my chickens with
Yeah.
anybody who will listen to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've definitely been at parties like later in the night where everybody's a little intoxicated and you're just like sitting around on couches, and like I'm thinking of this one party in particular where it was just everybody there had a doctorate. Like there were physicists there were medical doctors there was nuclear engineers there, and like I'm just sitting there just talking about bees, something I'm passionate about, and I'm looking around realizing that all these people are just like enthralled with me talking about bees. It's just a really like surreal kind of experience.
It
so
is.
everybody loves to hear about bees.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because I feel like it's a win-win with bees, because I don't know how many years ago it was, like the bees were dying,
Yep.
And now I feel like they've rebounded.
They have.
And which is great, and I feel like you were able to contribute to that. And like I would see honeybees in my yard, and I'd like, no one step on this, we gotta make sure it could be one of Chris's bees.
Well, thanks, I appreciate it. I try not to step on.
I feel like you got involved with bees even before that, before the bee craze, or at least before we knew about it. I feel like you started raising bees before like the death of the grand dying of all the bees.
I got into it probably right in about what was like the culmination of that, like when it started to get serious.
Okay.
I think I got in like right before that point.
Yeah,
but they recognized that there was a problem with the bee population, a couple decades ago, and it wasn't like people weren't losing their minds over it yet, but they knew that it was something that was happening. They had identified that CCD, colony collapse disorder, was a thing. They weren't sure what the contributing factors were or what they could do to mitigate it. They knew that it was a concern, and then that concern grew and grew, and then until a couple years ago, finally, in most countries, they outlawed systemic pesticides, which is a pesticide that they like genetically engineer into a plant itself.
Okay.
And they were actually supposed to be safer for bees because it wasn't like a contact thing, and bees just pollinate. They don't like eat the fruit, or they don't eat the vegetable or the plant. So it was supposed to be better. And although those insecticides weren't killing the bees outright, they are pretty sure that it messed with their navigation to a point where they wouldn't be able to find their way home.
Oh.
So the bees would leave to go gather resources and then not be able to return. And they're pretty sure that that's what was the main cause of colony collapse disorder. And to be fair, I'm not sure that they're even still 100% sure, but since they did that, a lot of bee colonies have recovered. So we can assume that that was probably the case.
Huh, that's interesting. All right. So you have bees, I have chickens, and with my chickens, I try to make sure they're very clean and don't smell. I share the eggs with my neighbors.
I love getting them,
and
by
whoever else will take them, because sometimes we have so many. I'm like, please take my eggs.
Yeah.
Any issues with neighbors ever with bees? And everyone's like, I got stung. This is Chris, your bees are stinging me.
Not really. Before I got the bees, I went to both of my immediate neighbors and said, hey, I'm thinking about getting bees. You know, would you have a problem with that? Because like the last thing I would want to do is just to piss off my neighbors, you know, because I gotta live next to them,
right?
You know, and I, just want to be neighborly. But actually, both of my neighbors at the time were very enthusiastic and excited about me getting the bees. My neighbor Tony actually made a giant welcome bees sign the day that I got them, and he had hung them where I was gonna put the bees. So that was really exciting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So no, and everybody loves to get honey. There's a lady a couple houses away where there were some bees like drinking out of her bird bath in the front of her house. And she said something to me once, and I was like, I don't know if they're my bees, because you don't know if they're your bees. And like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, they're just...
You're not trained bees.
Right? Like, I don't know. That was the only thing that's ever been said to me.
Okay.
And I was just kind of like, my hives are pointed in the other direction, so they probably go out that way more, which is actually somewhat true.
Okay.
The bees, they can go anywhere they want, but when you direct the entrance in a certain direction, that does tend to be the direction that the bees will go out from.
Gotcha.
So that's what I told her, and it was just kind of like, have a nice day, and that was the only thing that was ever said.
I mean, you're helping the environment.
Yeah.
They're stinging me.
Oh, you actually got stung?
I got stung there a little bit.
You want to move?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
They're picking up. That's okay. That's perfect. I wanted to get stung on video.
No, it's crazy. Like,
it's not bad. Honeybee stings aren't like getting stung by or bit by a wasp or anything like that.
No, and wasps will sting you multiple times,
Yeah.
and because they can, they will. And they're just jerks.
Right. Same like the yellow jackets. They just keep biting you.
Yeah.
Especially in the ankles. They just keep biting you in the ankles through your socks.
And the thing about it is like, everybody remembers being stung by bees as a kid. And when you get stung by a bee as a kid, like, it hurts. You lose your mind. It's like one of the most painful things you've experienced, and like it's terrible, and it traumatizes most people. Like, you see grown adults, walking down the street, dodging and doing this when they think that there's a bee around. But the reality is, like, you get stung, it hurts for a couple seconds, and then it doesn't really hurt that much.
Yeah.
Most of the time, unless it gets you on the ankle. The ankles are rough.
Yeah, I feel like the feet can be an issue sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been great. I greatly appreciate you sharing your hives with me.
That's awesome. You should come down
with the channel and letting me put this on the internet. Any final thoughts?
We're definitely going to have to get you back once things get reestablished.
Yeah, I would love
to get back up to like 5 or 6 hives, and
love to see like when they have the honey production. That'd be great.
Yeah, we can definitely do that next time there's a harvest. Probably next year sometime. But
okay.
If things go crazy, I might hit you up the end of the fall nectar flow and say, hey, we got some honey to harvest, and
yeah,
you can bring the kids down, and we can all get we can all get covered in sugar.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you again, Chris, for sharing your bees with us. I hope everyone learned something. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.